I've edited and revised it, and I stuck it up on Google Docs, so we all have access to it.
I saw that. I didn't get a chance to check it, so I'll do that later on.
So everybody has access and everybody can edit it.
Mhm.
So and you can edit away if you see stuff, but you should write notes in the margins if you edit, like why you did something, just so that people know.
Is it a Word document?
It's a Google document.
I just changed it to Word though.
So you can do track changes? Okay.
Right? Is this what you're talking about?
No, there's an actual link. It's a live link if you go online.
I thought that's where I got this from though. And then I saved it as a Word document.
Oh, if you saved it, yeah. You
Yeah.
can save it and change it, and then
Yes.
and then well, you wouldn't be able to upload it. You would have to. It's sort of easier to just do the edits in the document itself.
Okay.
You know, and it makes it keeps track of all the
Oh, it
changes.
keeps track, okay.
Yeah, it'll say, Megan, June 8th made this change, and everybody's name is in a different color, so we can see where all the editing took place. So I'm going to suggest that we don't use the time here to edit or go
Right.
through the document, but everybody has that link, and go home and look at it and edit and revise. We also have a lot of data that we've requested.
Yes.
And so I think we need to I would suggest we spend most of today looking at the data, because what we should do probably is not only, and thank you for putting that together, and it's up on Google now, and I'm just telling everybody we should all go home and edit and revise as we wish, so that we can all do that in live time. We're also going to try to get all this completed within the month, maybe, so that we can present it to this new superintendent. That'd be really great. So I see us really revising the Google Doc. I see us sorting through all this data that we've requested and seeing if we have further questions. And we can actually invite some data people come to the meeting, and we can give them either more questions, like this isn't clear, or please explain this, whatever. So I'd like us to clarify what our questions are in the data, and then I can schedule somebody to come. All right?
Liz, can you, with your contacts at Warner, can you have either a graduate student or a doctoral student or whatever, give us some, I started to do it, but I got distracted with other things, but I had to pull away. I really want to know what urban districts have attempted to go back to neighborhood schools, and how they did it, and how they what the results were, and what the pitfalls were, and what the challenges, pitfalls, and rewards.
That's a great question. Okay.
Because as we struggle here, it's so silly for us to reinvent the wheel. If other people have gone through this process, and we can learn from them in multiple ways, that puts us all the more ahead.
Right.
And all the more convincing as we speak in front of the new superintendent. Because if I was superintendent, that's exactly what I would.
You'd be
want.
looking for other, other examples. I agree. Okay, I can go look for that.
And also along those lines, I would also like to look at something I feel like has gotten kind of lost in the conversation is something about how we draw those attendance boundaries and socioeconomic integration, and how we look at neighborhoods and how which neighborhoods end up going to which schools, and being really smart about, including that in the policy.
That was one of my primary ideas for including the city. And because they are the real experts on that. Not that we're not, but they have expertise that we don't usually use.
Right.
And it's not too late for that.
No.
Because we're talking about concept here.
Right. Repeat your question again.
So what other districts, and I know there's lots of studies out there about which districts, urban districts, or not even urban districts, but use in assignment socioeconomic status in terms of, or drawing boundaries that include a cross section of income.
Okay.
The neighborhood groups are really important.
Yeah.
because I can tell you that the Josiah Charles House Neighbors in Action that I've been a part of, I helped form and mentor and nurture. That's part of the glue in the
Neighborhood
community.
association.
Oh, wow.
Sure.
And when you divide that, I mean, that's really counterproductive.
So I can say something about that. So I think, I mean, it sounds like what you're talking about is something like, can we draw the boundaries to include like a poor neighborhood and a rich neighborhood at the same
That
time?
are all
something
around
like that.
a
So
school.
I think
Not in every case.
that, I mean, what I've seen in other cities is, for example, the closest thing I can think to that is Berkeley. So they have, I think they have 9 elementary schools. They have 3 zones, and each zone is sort of drawn in sort of a funny shape to include. But it's not really a neighborhood school system because each zone has 3 schools in it. So you're not going to the school that's closest to your house, typically, and the zones themselves are these sort of funny shapes. So that you're going to one of 3 schools. Those 3 schools are not the 3 schools that are closest to your house.
Right.
And I just generally, I think it's very difficult to do that because the rich neighborhoods and poor neighborhoods are not mixed in together. They're all on
But
one
I
side
think
of
there
the
are
city.
cases in our city where they are.
And I think
they're actually
but-
back to back. And I think, I'm not saying it's going to work for every neighborhood school, but I'm saying if we're really going to do all this, why
good
wouldn't we
question.
take the time to actually look at where our schools are and how things could be tweaked a certain way? I mean, I think it's going to be important when we're drawing attendance boundaries, if this all happens, to really look at, and I'm not saying make funky shapes so they're not near their neighborhood school. I know you and I disagree on this, but I think we can't do all this work and not try to break up high poverty schools.
So I agree, and I think that the way to do it is to have an element of choice rather than drawing the boundaries in some.
And I can say that Buffalo, and you all maybe got this link, I'll pass this out as I'm talking. Ralph found this link to an article that Buffalo's working on this idea of neighborhood schools, but I can say I actually had a conversation with somebody who's involved in this initiative, and they have a combination of sort of a certain percent neighborhood and then a certain percent a larger out and another, then broader for the whole community. So it's not strictly neighborhood schools what they're doing. So it's, in other words, it's not an either or. It's not we're going to go all neighborhood or we're going to go all, choice. Yeah. I think that once you have choice, it's really hard to, and for some reasons it may not be good to have total choice because of some socioeconomic things and all sorts of issues. But I think a little bit of both is.
To me, it's just common sense, I think. I don't want to oversimplify it, but there are certain schools at School 17 that have a very well-defined school catchment area. I mean, there's no argument about that. But if you go a little bit south, that's not so because there's clusters of schools and neighborhoods. And then on the east side, it presents differently as well. So the smart thing to do, the only thing to do in my mind is to work with the city school district and people who really know this stuff, and with the parents and the parent groups, as we're doing in Buffalo, and create, due to the geographics and the really well chosen either school clusters, neighborhood schools, or zones.
Yeah, I think one size can't fit all. So we need a combination of options here so that it's what you said.
And then on top of it,
Zones,
just
neighborhood,
not
clusters.
to start policy, but it makes sense to not put everything in concrete.
Yeah.
So if I was a parent at School 17, and all of a sudden that's now a neighborhood school, but my child was in 5th grade, and wanted, or in seventh grade, and wanted to finish up, and then went through all the grades, well, it just made sense to do a waiver and let that child finish through.
Sure.
I mean, and that has to be respected.
Right. Yeah,
And-
you get into trouble when you just make a law and then you mandate it top down, and then everybody's supposed to have to, and it creates all sorts of new problems. So I think flexibility is the name, and choice and variation is really important here.
I actually think that the boundaries that we have now in the street directory are pretty reasonable. And I think that
Eleanor,
the
there's room at the table.
Did you find that list?
yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, I think that if more people start going to their neighborhood schools, they'll have to be adjusted because some schools will fill up. But I don't think we can really address that in this committee. It's something that's going to have, something that the staff will have to do over time.
Well, I don't think we could use the attendance boundaries from aren't they from the 80s?
Yeah.
Like, I think we need to redo that. We have to look
Why?
at those.
I mean,
Because exactly what I'm saying. I mean, I think we have to
Well, I
look
think
at
we
how
need to look at this
we need
socioeconomic and
updated.
see-
Yeah, but we need updated
So,
data.
but it may or may not be redrawn, but it's
Right.
reasonable to look at it.
Right.
I think.
Right.
So, okay, so let me get back to what I wanted to, for those of you who just came in. The new superintendent is coming in hopefully real soon, and it would be lovely to present this to him, right? So we'd love to wrap this up within a month or so, in addition to getting it to the policy committee, right? So that's going to be the goal, and in order to do that goal, I want us to, hopefully got the link to the Google Doc. You can go on the Google Doc and edit whatever you like. And we're going to study data today, mostly because we put in so many requests and we haven't really had time to look at that. And then I think Will and I were talking, and we thought, and also after Greg, you and I spoke, Greg and I were talking at the end of the meeting last week, and you were saying that you wanted to do something concrete out in the community, like maybe do.
Yeah, well, I thought it'd be a good idea after, what we've been discussing is maybe if we could come up with like 6 questions that we could use to gather data to kind of like summarize the things we've been talking about. We could do more questions, but I think we got to keep it simple. So for instance, and I would be willing to like spend 2 hours a week talking to parents, just gathering this data from these 6 questions, and we would come up with these questions, that would kind of cover some broad stuff here to be able to, so we could narrow down better choices,
Because that's a good way to reach out
Yeah,
beyond this
that was
committee.
the other thing.
And it's a real concrete thing we can do to sort of check that what we've done so far is feeling right with people outside of this committee. But I'm thinking a way to get at that when I was talking with Willa. She said, well, why don't we, when we go into the Google Docs, like there's 3 sections, right? The 3 groups. If each group could read what's already been put in there and come up with 3 or 4 asks, like this is what we described, this is what we like, what do we want to specifically ask for? So that could be some work we do in here. So come up with asks, and then we can develop the questions off of those asks. Maybe the questions would come out really nicely out of it. What are we asking for specifically? Does that make sense? Kinda. Well, see what we've described in the 3 groups so far is a lot of detail and a lot of specifics, but we haven't necessarily put it in language that says, therefore, we want this,
Right.
and this.
Right.
So we want some specific asks. And so I think that each section should come up with 3 or 4 asks. And we can make that a longer list, but at least 3 or 4. Okay? And then perhaps we could come up with some questions about those asks with the community. Yeah.
What about having like parent focus groups like they did about the climate in schools?
That would be a great way to collect feedback on that. So there's that. And so I'm just naming the things that are left to do before we kind of wrap this up. Edit the Google Doc. come up with 3 to 4 asks, and then some questions about each section. Go out and have some forums, some focus groups, or interview people directly to get more information back. And this is something that fell between the cracks.
Oh, yeah, Liz.
Yes.
That may be a real strategic way to partner with the city,
Uh-huh.
because I'm going back to the neighborhood groups again. And some are quite powerful, and others are mediocre, and others are just emerging. But the city may help us do these focus groups.
We could take it out.
Yeah, and so it would be very powerful for a superintendent to hear.
Okay.
We've got parent focus groups, which are very, that's the first thing he's going to ask, how the parents feel, and how the residents feel too. Then you have community groups here in Rochester, well, how do they feel?
Right.
And so if we had all those ducks in a row, and as they're doing in Buffalo, I don't think they're doing robocalls, but that's not too hot.
They've done a lot of surveys there.
Yeah, surveys.
And we haven't really done that here. So
But
that's a great idea.
and the research is, I think, fairly well informed that the busing destroys the neighborhood. So if that's the case, then how do we neutralize that and get back to vibrant, healthy neighborhoods?
Okay. The other thing I wanted to do was, see these lovely little placement books? You've all seen these.
Yeah.
I would love us to critique these, like red pen them all over the place. That would be a great little project to do in here, or for somebody to take home and bring it back. So that's another thing I'd like to see happen. So that kind of, and then we need to bring all our stuff back and connect it with policy. Okay? So I wish I had a board here where I could write stuff. So once again, edit the Google Doc, come up with asks in each section, develop questions for the community from those asks, and then start going out and doing a survey and focus groups around that. Critique these placement office booklets, because they're horrible, I think. And we need to study the data, which we're going to start today, okay? And then we will invite data people in here and ask them further questions for clarification.
When you say ask, just so I understand, what does that mean? We're going to develop asks.
I was going to ask that.
Does it mean ask the school board to do something?
It means, well, maybe I should have the doc.
So, I can give an example, I think. So,
Yeah.
for the group that I'm working with, our ask would be that the district create a postcard to send home to every family that has their neighborhood school and principals, something
Yeah.
like that. That's our
As
ask
concrete
for
as
our
that, just a
recruitment.
real concrete.
Yeah, just very specific.
So then I go back to, that's good, and now I get it, okay? But I think what everything I mentioned was the parents. And so if we could focus on, what are the parents' expectations? I keep going back to expectations, okay? Because expectations have clear outcomes. So if I was a parent, I would expect that my child is not bused from here to Chicago. I would expect that the neighborhood school is worthy of any school that in the city. Okay, so I would expect that I have safe walking for my child. I don't have to hold my breath every day for my child to walk to and from school. I would expect that that the resources to that school are given in a way that helps and support that. So there are expectations.
Well, that could be a question,
So-
what are your basic expectations for a school that meets your family's needs? And you could provide some suggested things like that
So
to prompt
the new
ideas.
superintendent or this group, looking at the parents in focus groups, their expectations, clearly you can put some together, but come up with 7 to 10 or 12 expectations to help us drive everything we're doing here.
Right.
And so You can do research, you can do national research, you can do it, but a superintendent looks at the expectations of both parents and residents. If I'm a resident, I don't have children in the school, I expect that school to be a school that every parent wants their child to go to because of my property values.
Right.
My property values. Because that school generates my property values, even though I don't have a child there. So residents have expectations as well.
Right. Right. Hey,
I was wondering
welcome. Good.
if the questions, like for instance, some of the questions would be, is the reason you want your child to go to another school outside your neighborhood because of the street they have to cross, it's because of traffic?
No, you have to say what is the reason
Why?
you'd like
Yeah,
your
why?
child to go to a
Yes.
different. You can't give them
Can't
the
give them
answer inside of the question.
It's
That's
gotta be
just-
open.
No, well, I do. I know that it's open-ended, but what I'm trying to, I think we need to narrow it down. I was just wondering if we needed to narrow it down to traffic, like safety, like fights, or because of just transportation issues. So like if we, you're right, we can't lead the question, but I think we would want to know, to me.
You could say, what are some reasons why then? And then let them give their own
Yeah, that might be
reasons
a way.
why, because you can't tell
But
them
we
this
do
is
have,
why.
but I think it seems what I've heard is that there are various reasons,
Right, yeah.
you know, and it might be important to at least understand what demographics are pointing to specific reasons, because I think that's what's going to happen is, you know, certain people want busing because of transportation issues,
Right.
certain people want busing because of traffic issues, and other people
Schedules.
just want to be able to monitor, you know, where their, you know, safety for the neighborhood maybe.
Better schools.
Yeah.
Going about timing, just when a child is put on a bus, then the mom and dad can get to work sooner
Yeah.
and not have to get wraparound care.
Yeah, those are the kind of questions I think kind of matter instead of just asking, because I'm not sure, you know, if we just ask people these questions, they may not be privy to all the things we've been discussing, so they may not address the issues we're specifically looking to see.
Right. Okay.
When we finally get to the place of putting out a survey or feedback or whatever, make sure that we're using the district parent council to help facilitate connection with the parents. They may not be the only parents, but the district parent council needs to be included in that process to get the parents involved.
Oh, yeah? So it would be a disaster if they weren't.
Yeah. Well, and it's just logical.
So why don't we take a look at some of this data, and that may be about all we do in today's meeting, because there's a lot of data here. We may need to take a couple of meetings with the data, because look at this huge stack of data that we've asked. Maybe I can read out what we've asked for. And I'm a little bit at a loss. Maybe you guys have some ideas about how we can dive into this. So we have asked for student residential mobility data, like how mobile are students? How much moving from one address to another is happening in the district? We have that. Can we pass that around? Okay, take some. We have geocode and zone analysis. Can you define that? What that means?
Yeah, that
I'm
was
not sure.
confusing.
Well, geocode is a census data, but precisely what they fed us, I don't know. I assume this is about whether our students are living in the zone, even in the same zone as the school that they're attending.
Okay. We have RCSD students by attendance zone. That sounds like what you just said.
We saw that. Now this is specifically what school is their assigned neighborhood school versus which school they attend. That's why your grid is, 40 columns or 40 rows deep and 40 columns across.
Okay.
So that would be much more specific than
Okay,
Geocode zone one.
okay.
In fact, you could infer with this one what the zone answer is.
Okay. We have summary of findings regarding school of choice, meaning how does getting your first choice impact student achievement, and who is getting their first choice? Like the high, there's, looks like fewer African American students are getting their choice. Or not first choice, I guess, first choice, and fewer kids in poverty. There's some distinctions between kids that are getting first choice, and so that's really important information to look at. Like that. I don't want to overwhelm people, but I do want to pass this out. We've asked a lot, so we have lottery choice results in 2015. That shows first, second, third, fourth choice, citywide, manual, and grand totals at different grades. I know. I know, I nearly brought my magnifying. This is online too, and you can zoom in, okay? So it's under.
It's on, you said it's on.
It's Board Docs.
Board Docs.
It's on Board Docs, so you can look at it.
Splendid.
There's no.
The Zoom feature is the greatest thing on the planet.
Yeah. Okay, then there's lottery analysis for pre-K, 7th, and 9th grades. And we can take a look at that.
Extra.
I'm not sure what the difference is between this pre-K students' attendance. Did I pass that one out? I don't think I did. Okay. So, a few more. Sorry. It'll come back around. And this is one that you brought in, John Boutte. This one, the school feeder patterns, I think. Feeder patterns. And once again, geocode analysis. That is where students live versus where they go to school. I guess we'll just start. All right. So maybe the best way to do this is.
Oh, this is just by zone.
So maybe the best way to do this is just start with the ones that we most think that we can discuss. There'll be some that we're totally clueless about, and we'll leave those for later, and maybe we need to bring a data person in here to answer some of these things. But let's start with, who would like to pull one out to...
The geocode analysis, I was looking at that yesterday and today. No, there was one that had some blue markings on the first.
The matrix?
Yeah.
This one?
Yeah, that one.
that would be okay.
That one I was
So we're looking at this one.
coming up with 0 in terms of understanding it.
So why don't we take a look at this all together and make sure we understand this one and see what questions we might generate from this.
I think I know what this means.
Can you speak to it and we'll have a discussion about it?
I think geocode means the traditional street directory attendance boundary for that school. Okay, so
Oh,
The-
definitions are on the bottom.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So, for example, it says in the chart it says 1% school 1. That means that how many of the kids at school 1 are from the attendance zone for school 1? Only 1%.
1% at school 1.
Yeah, it's 3 kids.
Yeah, okay. So school school 1 is getting everybody bused there, basically.
And the highest for any school is 32%, and the average is 17%.
Wow. Okay, that's pretty sobering.
That's about what it's been.
Well, that's a good example. School 1 doesn't have a neighborhood.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. It
Where's
Of course it
school
does.
at?
It's Cobb's Hill.
right in the middle
Well,
of
it
the
has
park.
to
Yeah.
neighborhood.
I mean, it
doesn't
has
have
its
to-
own-
Goes over to Park,
But,
yeah.
I mean,
doesn't have-
Actually, part
Yeah,
of
it's
the
like
park-
way
part
in
of
the back,
park area.
right?
right. But isn't school one a specialty school?
Yes.
No.
For,
No,
for
no,
children?
no,
It's a neighborhood
not
school.
Not anymore.
Here, the thing
Really?
is that
Yeah.
this is a neighborhood that aged in place.
Yeah.
They just don't have kindergarten age children.
Well, they, right.
Hmm.
But they don't move there because they don't want to send their kids to school there.
There used to be a school specializing for children that had difficulty in hearing. Why did that
Yeah,
change?
that
Well,
was
they do
part of
have
it.
an autism program
They
there.
have a program, but it's still neighborhood school.
So
But
if you,
it's not a dangerous neighborhood. In fact, it's a really
Nice, nice one.
safe neighborhood. So it's a little odd that you live there.
Oh, those kids.
so if you look at this chart, it tells you how many kids in the attendance zone for school one have kids are in RCSD, and there's 38.
Can you walk us through? Tell us what columns so we can find
So
out.
it's, okay, so everybody
number
have
one.
this one?
Is this
The one without the highlight?
That's
The
not
one
the
that you
one I'm
can't
looking
see?
at.
The one you can't, the one you magnify.
You can see it though. I
Super
think
small.
Okay.
Okay, so the columns are where students live. So if you look at the bottom of the so the first column is school one. At the bottom it says grand total 38. That means there are 38 kids in the attendance zone for school one who go to some RCSD school. And that includes high school, so it's not just the K through 6. And if you look at the row above that that says RCSD pre-K through 6 and RCSD pre-K through 8, so that means there are 24 kids who live in the attendance boundaries for school one who go to some RCSD elementary school. And there's one other kid who goes to a school that's a K through 8, so there's 25 kids.
I'm afraid I'm lost. I'm sorry.
So just looking just at the attendance zone for school number one, like the boundary for school number one, because it's a the homeschool boundary,
Okay.
that they have the number of kids listed that live in that area that go to school number one.
So you're looking at what column, what?
Okay, so
Up top is
The-
the schools going across.
so at the top
Number
it's,
one is school number one up the top.
School number one, okay.
okay. So if you look at the first row and the first column, it says 3.
3.
Okay, so that means there are 3 kids who live in the zone for school one
Uh-huh.
and who go to school one.
Okay.
Okay, now if you look at the bottom of that column,
Very bottom of the same column.
okay, it says 38.
Yes.
That means there are 38 kids who live in the zone for school one and who go to some RCSD school.
Ah, okay. So this is where they're distributed within the zone.
So,
Only a handful in your high school, we can tell, because we're not a numbered school.
And the other thing is,
Six
this
and
doesn't give us
one.
the number of kids that go to private schools, charter schools, that live in that neighborhood. You know what I mean? So there's an unknown also number of kids.
That's true, there could be more kids.
Right.
well, there are.
Right.
I mean, there's
Right,
definitely
there
more
are.
than 35 kids
I'm
in that
just
neighborhood.
reminding
but-
people that that's not the amount of kids, that's the amount that go to the
You want to
RCSD.
join the program?
So our goal is to
Pull
get
that
those
chair
kids
out.
to come back.
Now, the grand totals, like if I look at school 44, it says 842, and school 16, which are 2 that we're interested in, it's 1,876. Now, are those numbers like the catchment areas that we're showing here, which have kind of similar numbers? And what year is this relative to, do we know?
This is, I think this is 2015, yeah.
2015, okay.
Okay, but so one, just keep in mind when you look at that 1,800 number for school
Mhm.
16,
So that's
that
the
includes
question.
high school students.
So,
Okay.
So if you look at the 2 rows, so there's a row that says 654 and 521.
For which one?
So I'm looking at school 16.
16.
To 6th grade.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, the sum of those two numbers is really what you want. That's the number of kids who are going to either a K-6 or a K-8.
So that line, I don't have my reading glasses. Grand total is different than the total RCSD. Can you explain the difference between those two?
It says like if one is for the preschool to 6,
Well,
or if one is for high school or elementary, basically break it down.
So the total RCSD and grand total, the numbers are all the same, so.
Oh, they're the same, okay.
Okay.
Okay, see, I don't have my glasses. Do we have any questions for this? The year, we should confirm the year, right?
I think I got a question.
What's your question? What is
I was looking at some of these online last night because I can't see them now. But how do we utilize this data?
So I think this tells us if we were to take the existing boundaries as they're drawn currently and force everyone to go to their assigned school, they wouldn't fit. I mean, some schools have way too many. Some schools have 3 times as many kids as spaces, and then school one has 30 kids. So that's, I think how we use that is we just have to, take that into account.
The other thing you can look at is where the kids are going or coming from to go to a certain school.
Yeah, which.
So, I mean, I did that for 16 years ago, and the second biggest population was people who lived 1.6 miles away. Or that's the school they went to.
So do we beat people over the head and say, see, this is why you should go to X school because of these numbers? Is that what we do?
Well, let me give you an example from the School 1 catchment area. You've got 15 of those students going to School 23, right next door. So the question to ask is, why are you choosing School 23 when you could be growing your own neighborhood population at school number 1? I think I know the answer, and is that they just don't want to put the work into claiming that school has their own. They want to go to a school that's already successful.
Plus, if they're walking, they have to cross Culver Road.
If they are in the School 1 catchment area, yes.
Right.
And why would they do that? Except that they're not walking, their parents are dropping them
Yeah, I
off.
don't know, I'm just saying.
I
that's
mean, they don't
one of
even take the
issues
bus, their parents just drop them off.
there. Well, my kids always walk. I didn't really pick.
What's that?
My kids walked from Audubon Street
To
down
number 1?
Harvard Street, across the bridge to school number 1.
Right.
But I think what happened, the bigger picture here is that it lost its neighborhood. It was no longer known as a neighborhood school. I mean, it's lost its identity. That's what happened to that school in particular. It's no longer seen as a neighborhood school. Everybody knows that kids are coming from the furthest part of the city to come there. So that's why parents who live there now are like, it's not a neighborhood school. So that's
But it
why.
lost its identity 20 years ago.
Right, when the policy was changed.
No, it lost its identity before the policy changed because the neighborhood aged in place, because there were no children there. And to fill the building, the principal was taking applications and hand-picking the parents to fill those seats. Hand-picking. And so, in other words, she had every opportunity to craft a successful school, and yet, even so, wasn't particularly successful at it.
What about taking this data and seeing like where like the higher populated schools are, and seeing like you know how they have like charts where they show like poor, good standing, like, and seeing like the dynamics of that, like seeing if like the schools that have like the higher number of kids, like like just seeing if that is one of like ruling that out as a reason for why their kids don't go to that school. You know what I'm saying? Like we can't say that.
Good standing, receivership.
Right. We can't say like if the school is a good school and your child still don't go to it, then obviously that's not the reason why your child's not going to that school. It's because you like the other school or they were in that school for longer. You get what I'm saying? Like,
So what would be the question we would ask?
How do you
we
determine
wouldn't
the
act it.
perception of something? Is it just by numbers, or is it word of mouth from the parents?
I think,
The school.
Liz,
I'm sorry.
see this document?
Yeah.
There's no page numbers,
Okay.
but if you go 2 pages into it, under number 2, scope and purpose, go down to D. It says that the home school, essentially what we're just talking about. The homeschool historic backbone was revised in 1987, but now this structural displacement is so severe in Rochester that it's no longer possible to redraw homeschool attendance areas and boundaries, I would say for most schools, simultaneously satisfy instructional capacity and provide for social, economic, or racial ethnic diversity. But on the next page, it says, many of the district's 34 home elementary schools do not have enough seats to accommodate the resident students, and only 60% of the district's elementary students attend their home school. Now here's the sentence that got me. Yet no systematic or consistent process identifies the location and number of available seats and how such available seats are filled.
That's describing the old system.
Now, Maria, who is the transportation director, the first year I came back, I asked her, where can I get a database to see how many kids are in the school 17 catchment area defined, and how many of those kids are coming to school and how many kids are going in. So how many kids are eligible in that catchment area to come to school 17? There was about 850 kids there. Now, only about, at the time, 150 of them were coming to school 17. They're all were going elsewhere. That could be done for every single school, in every single area.
So
We
say the
have it.
questions
This is it.
then.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah.
Capacity. He's
So-
talking about the capacity.
Okay.
Matching.
And the capacity, yeah.
I mean, we have the data on what children are currently attending our district and what schools they're attending, but we don't know yet, because we apparently didn't answer the question, is how many children can in any given building hold.
So in the
How
old,
many
so in the old
seats
days, we
are in
could,
each
yeah,
building.
right. So in the old days, it was fairly easy to say if you live in this neighborhood, you go to that school.
Yeah.
It's not so simple now. So that's what may help us drive clusters. Neighborhoods, clusters, or zones.
Just the total capacity.
Yeah. So instead of having a child come from Carter Street all the way over to 17, that we have the cluster zone on that side of the city.
Okay.
Especially in your neighborhood where you have a number of schools together.
Okay. So I'm aware,
Now, when you look at what we ran into when we were trying to get school 10 to stay in the ward, and then the board asked the district to look at school 1, school 3710 building, and also school 44, and they chose to close school 44, which is right in the middle of a whole bunch of kids, and school 1, was chosen to stay open. Now,
why?
1 versus 44, the only thing that you can say, 44 had less green space, very little green space, and at the time they had shoehorned 7 and 8 in there, which made the green space issue even bigger issue than it is for an elementary school. So.
Okay. So let me just get back to what I was saying. I'm looking at the time. We're like almost 20 past, and you and I have to leave in about 8 minutes. We've gotten through, not quite completely, these two. Do you want to continue writing questions for these two until we're done, and then we could save the rest for the next meeting?
We have one quick comment on this. I think when we talk about clusters,
Uh-huh.
you can actually redo this data by clusters. It says schools X, Y, Z are cluster 1.
Could we read
Yeah,
that?
well, this exists as a spreadsheet, right? So,
Yeah.
and not
Yeah.
a PDF, so.
That's good, John.
We could ask them
We
to do
could-
that
Well,
for us.
or any of us could, sort of
Online, it was a
regroup,
PDF.
what's that?
I think it was a PDF.
Was it?
If you had Acrobat Pro, you can.
Somebody
Yeah,
must
if you
have
can
it.
reverse it and turn it into an Excel spreadsheet. I
Okay.
can just rearrange the columns.
Okay, so you're going to do that? Okay, great. Any other questions with this one? Or questions with this one?
Makes sense now.
They want to comment on that. You got the blue.
Maybe, at this time of day, I do well in the morning. Maybe we could see if anything jumps out on us, at us.
Take it home?
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And then,
Come back with.
or just email, and then she can compile things we could fine tune and talk about.
I like that, except for one thing, I want to make sure we all understand these, like, I wasn't sure I could read this, so if we have any questions about any of these, can we just quickly look through it and see if anybody doesn't understand how to read it, because then it makes it hard for us to do our work at home.
Can I just point one out that I think is really important to look at?
Sure.
And that's the enrollment of pre-K students. And I think this is pretty easy to read, actually, but I think one of the things we really need to look at is,
What's it look like?
I'm sorry, this one.
Oh, okay.
Is when we have our youngest students enrolled in a pre-K program at a school, we need to look at having a really clear policy on whether those students carry over into kindergarten,
Yeah.
or is there sibling preference. That's something that's been really wishy-washy, and those are our new prospective parents, and we want to be really clear on what.
So, I'm sorry, state the question again, I was looking. I was writing through
What will
papers.
what will the policy be for pre-K students carrying over into kindergarten?
When I was looking at the data last
We can
night.
make that recommendation. I am so sorry.
No.
I talked right over you.
No, go ahead.
A response to Megan's question about getting clear. This year, it's decided the lottery's already happened, but we have from now until sometime around Thanksgiving to make changes to this policy. And this group can make a recommendation. If there is consensus about whether pre-K should be getting priority over neighborhood residents, that's the decision to be made. Who gets absolute priority? Who gets second priority? Who gets third priority? We can make a recommendation.
Right. And we don't have to do that now. I'm just asking people to look at that and think about.
Because I was wondering.
Would you carry over pre-K be equivalent to sibling in terms of prioritization?
Is it the correlation? Because the one data, the number that jumped out at me when I was looking at the data was there were like per year 3,100 families changed schools or moved out of their zones a year.
I don't know, is there something in this?
Yeah.
We did ask that question, it is in there.
That was the letter.
Yes.
And
Yeah, it was the letter.
And I was wondering, does that happen between pre-K and like first grade? Is that some of the issues?
Yeah, when folks are moving, when folks are moving throughout the school year, it could be happening in any grade. It's unlikely that
It's
that-
not bunched in one grade or another.
Within the year, not necessarily. Certainly at the end of the year, there's always the kindergarten and
Well, July, August, you're going to have,
the middle school jump and the high school
well,
jump.
that's when they actually leave the city altogether, but, tell you, as a landlord, I see families move at all times of the year. Largely economics. I can't afford to live here anymore. Is a huge driver of mobility.
That's why I thought it would be younger parents that would
Well,
frequently.
you know, in this recession, economics has affected every family at every age. You might have younger kids, but they may have older siblings, you know.
So,
You could do demographics, the millennials would probably be higher because they're doing job changing
It's on
faster.
there.
Even though it's a tough job situation,
that.
they're changing more frequently.
so I don't think pre-Ks should have priority over the neighborhood.
Well, I don't think we
But
should discuss it now.
I think, how about having people in the neighborhood have priority for that pre-K?
Right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
one of the
that's-
things we need to
that's-
decide,
yeah.
right?
We're looking into to whether we can legally. The problem is that the UPK system came to us courtesy of the New York State's legislature with a whole bunch of requirements. And some of our schools don't have UPK.
Right.
So that, which is a huge bugaboo for me. I think when we first implemented choice, one of the synergies was we also went to full-day kindergarten for all of our schools. So that all of our schools, none of our schools had an advantage over another. All of our schools offered the same thing, full-day kindergarten. Which prior to that, some schools had half days, some only had full day. So it would influence what people chose based on, the presumption being all families wanted full day kindergarten. If they couldn't get it, they were, unhappy, and they would actually go to a different school to get to the full day kindergarten. We have essentially the same dilemma with UPK, but it's not certain, and getting our lawyers to look at it, whether we have the ability to say no to pre-K, to a pre-K application based on where they live.
Okay.
One other little question. On this
Yeah.
chart, the one with the green lines on it,
Uh-huh.
what does the manual mean?
Do you know what the manual means?
Is that the people who get into the
Oh,
kindergarten
were
program?
placed.
That is the $64,000 question, because it's half the kids.
Okay.
So
I think
what
it's-
is manual?
I think it's kids that after applications went in, they were the ones who did not
That's a question
register.
for data. We're going to write that
Well,
question. right in.
manual
They
could
didn't
mean
apply.
that they were English language learners that were placed in a school based on their language
Could it be
proficiency.
siblings?
Okay.
Hmm?
Could it be
I
siblings?
think it's outside the board.
I think it's kids that didn't register.
Okay. All right,
That didn't
I've heard
fill
the
out the
question, what does manual mean?
Mhm.
And we are out of time, so hang on to the data, take a look at it, come back with questions. We're going to continue this data conversation next time, collecting questions for our data people, and then we'll have them come and answer our questions. And also go online and look at the Google Doc, and if there's any editing you want to do, if there are any specific asks you'd like to do, or any questions, please add it. I put at the very end of the document, you'll see section 1 questions, section 2 questions, section 3 questions.
Can I
Yes.
just leave one final thought, a conversation I had with a student today, just to be something to think about.
Yes.
So I asked a 6th grader today about, the end of the school year is coming, and are you excited for middle school, and where are you going? I don't know. She had no idea where she's going
We
to
don't
school,
have
and
middle
that
school.
just breaks my heart. She has no idea where she's going to school next year.
No anticipation, positive or negative.
And, pardon?
No anticipation, positive or negative.
Wow.
Just
So it's just something to think about, like, it's not
So
okay.
I have actually one meeting question. We had said the next 3 would be on Thursdays.
Mhm.
Is there any possibility we could meet on Tuesday next week? Does that work? for
I'm
you?
out of town, I'm still in DC.
I've got a conflict.
You have, okay, then we'll keep it on Thursday.
Just to remind people, tonight at 7 o'clock at Third Presbyterian Church, Great Schools for All is doing their town meeting. Catch up.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's more information from another group, but they have invested a lot of time doing surveys. And the survey document is something like 100 and some pages. That's a lot of the questions. I mean, some of the questions we were asking tonight, they have information not just from the city school district, but the whole county. So anyway, it's another
Yeah,
place
a lot of
that
information.
it
there.
has information. If you don't want to overload yourself, that's fine. I'm going because I'm collecting the information.
That's good. I also want to mention, it is up on Google, but if folks would prefer a hard copy, here's the combined document that Dan put together, if you prefer hard copies.
There was about the bucket.
It's, here, I'll give you a copy.
Advantage always.
Some people prefer hard copy. It's the combined proposal that we've been working on.
It says bucket for the bucket.
Yeah, hard copies for the.
Oh, it's a combined?
It's,
Okay.
yeah, it's what's
Yeah, 'cause I
shown
got
3
bucket
groups
1,
put
2, 3
together.
here. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna need 2 sets of all the stuff we have, because the next meeting I'm going to, I'll see 2 of the people who couldn't make it here today.
Does anybody want this, to take a stab at these?
I already have, but I'll do it again.
And Greg is interested too. Well, it's only one of each.
One of each, okay.
But we could pass them around, we could rotate it 1 week, 1 person, take a stab at it, and then bring them back next time. Okay, thanks, everyone.
Right, Jen?
Upstairs.
No, it's-
Yeah. I got- yeah.